The liquid culture.
What's up, friends? Thank you for being back here with me on part 2 of the sparkling wine episode here for the liquid culture. I'm Mitchell Chirac. Thank you for being here with me again, everybody. So we are moving on. We are talking about Gruet domestic sparkling wines from New Mexico, using them as a medium to get us talking a little bit about some of that kind of traditional method sparkling wine production, and a little bit about some of the terms that you guys might find when you're out there looking to pick up some bottles and trying to kind of figure out what kind of sparkling wines you like. So we started with, in the part 1, we started with the 2012 Blanc de Blanc. So we talked about vintage versus non-vintage champagnes or sparkling wines, and then we talked about Blanc de Blanc, what that means, 100% Chardonnay grapes used in the production of the wine. So I don't know if I touched on that enough in the first part, but generally sparkling wines, at least from Champagne, are made with a combination of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. There are some other grapes allowed in there in smaller amounts, but generally what we see is a blend of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay predominant. Blanc de Blanc means 100% Chardonnay. Now, a lot of people might not realize that with sparkling wine production, even if it's, let's say, a Blanc de Noir, which is 100% Pinot Noir, that still is going to come out as a clear wine if it is not made in the rosé style. People think, well, that's weird. Pinot Noir is a red grape. How does it come out as a clear white wine? Well, the flesh of the Pinot Noir grape is in fact a clear flesh. So you get all of the color from the skins. Once you take those grapes, harvest them, put them in the crusher, press them out, crusher and the press, two different things, crush them, press them, you get a clear juice as long as there's no skin contact on that Pinot Noir. So even with a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, you still, unless it's made in a rosé style, which part 3 we're going to get into rosé, it can still come out as a clear wine. We are working with another vintage, Blanc de Blanc, from Gruet on part 2 today, but there's a little bit of a difference with this wine. Little bit of a difference with this wine. So we are working with the 2011 Sauvage Blanc de Blanc. Now this is for sure a wine that you probably won't find outside of New Mexico. The Sauvage you would find, but a vintage Blanc de Blanc Sauvage you may not. Now, again, I've seen the standard kind of non-vintage Sauvage from Gruet at, I want to say, Whole Foods or Central Market in Dallas. So that Sauvage can be found. This one is the 2011 Blanc de Blanc, which is a little bit more smaller production. So we have, again, a vintage champagne a year older than the one, vintage sparkling wine that is a year older than the last wine that we had. Also a Blanc de Blanc, so we're 100% Chardonnay with this wine as well. But Sauvage, what does that mean? Zero dosage. Zero dosage with this wine. So we talked about in the first part the method of making a sparkling wine and the method Champenois method. What happens is after the aging takes place in the bottle, that secondary fermentation with the bottle cap, the wines are turned over time so that all that yeast kind of is captured. Obviously I don't want to pour this over, but all that yeast is kind of captured right here in the neck, and then what they go through is the process of disgorgement, which pops that bottle cap, removes all that dead yeast, and you're left with a nice clear sparkling wine. At that point, the winemaker has a decision to make of, do I put the cork in and just leave it as is, or do I add a little bit of additional sugar in there to help round out the body of the wine, cut through some of that acidity a little bit, and help it be a little creamier on the palate. The first wine that we had a slight amount of dosage in it. Still considered a brut wine, which means minimal residual sugar left in the bottle. This wine is a zero dosage wine. That means as soon as that disgorgement takes place, Cork is popped in, wire cage, and it's done. So this has no residual sugar, or at least a very small amount of residual sugar, but an amount of residual sugar that would be unperceivable on your palate. So what I'm expecting with this wine is for it to be a little bit, sauvage. It kind of makes you think of like the word like savage. I'm expecting this wine to be a little bit more savage than the last wine. You won't have, I don't think I had that lemon curd on that first wine in part one, that kind of creamy, rich, smooth, supple kind of mouthfeel. With this, I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting a little sharper acidity. I'm expecting a little bit more bite from the carbonation and the acid in this wine. Still that same beautiful pale straw kind of golden color on this wine, just like with the first wine. It does look like we've got a little bit more action with the bubbles here. Let's dive in. Still, honestly, the nose is about the same. We've got about the same characteristics on the nose with this kind of lemony, bready kind of characteristic that you get from the yeast. That bread, that biscuit, that toast, that brioche, very common. Brioche is generally kind of the term used, at least in Champagne. We're talking about this kind of buttery, toasty, bready quality that you get from the yeast. Yeah, I mean, I would say minute differences in the nose between the two wines. But drastic difference on the palate. Much sharper, bone dry. There is, I honestly, I'd have to look it up. I would venture to guess there is zero residual sugar in this wine. It is bone dry, great sharp, like razor sharp acidity on it. The effervescence is slightly stronger, it seems to me, on this wine. So this is the kind of wine that, so my wife, I like to use her as an example on a lot of these things because she's a very kind of classic example of a lot of palates. So when we go out and she asks for a glass of sparkling wine, or as I said in part one, she usually asks for champagne, whether they have champagne or some sparkling wine from another region. She always wants it to be dry as it can possibly be. This is the kind of wine that if you are out there looking for the driest example of a sparkling wine that you can find, something with zero dosage. Now, it may say sauvage on it. It may not be labeled as sauvage, but it may say sauvage somewhere on it. But a zero dosage wine is where you're going to find the driest example of a sparkling wine. Any sort of cheap $8 to $12 bottle of just kind of bulk sparkling wine you get, if you were to pour a glass of that next to a glass of this and drink them, that would taste like straight up candy to you, because those wines have a ton of residual sugar in them, because that's kind of the standard gulpable kind of palate for a lot of people. If you are more in my wife's camp where you want something bone dry, you want to look for zero or minimal dosage. That is a big actual play that's being made with the kind of natural wine scene, people making their sparkling wines with minimal or zero dosage, because that's intervention, right? You're not really allowing the wine to express itself in its best, like most natural state. So a dosage they look at as some kind of an intervention, and so they are making their wines a lot, their sparkling wines a lot with minimal dosage. And pet nat is something that you see a lot in the natural wine world as well. Totally different style of getting to your carbonation. That's an episode for another time. But I would say that if you are looking for bone dry examples of sparkling wine, then I would say that you should look for something with zero or minimal dosage. If you're looking for a bottle like this bottle in particular, even though it's difficult to find, this was a $27 bottle, guys. $27, and this is a banging sparkling wine, very high quality. quality, very well made wine. And to me, it's like, it's difficult to find a bottle of non-vintage bulk sparkling wine from California that's at that price. So again, I'm going to highly recommend checking out Gruet for value to quality plays in the sparkling wine scene. You can find them. Trust me, you can find them. You can find Gruet, probably not this bottle, but I've seen the non-vintage Sauvage on the shelves. That is sharp. I have to say, I think I like the vintage Blanc de Blanc better. I like the creamier mouthfeel on that. But again, if you are someone who wants something bone dry, razor sharp acidity, look for minimal dosage. That was part 2. Part 3 coming up next. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you at part 3. All right, bye.